folks. It's the interim edition of the Dallas College Philosophy Club. Summer 2 is over. Fall has not yet started. And yet here we are, continuing on.
Here we are.
With the thought process and talking of the thought process and the having of the thoughts and all that good stuff. All right, so today's topic again is life experience valuable. Now, as I was just explaining, or kind of recapping to George and Luke here, again, the question was derived from conversations, different elements of conversations that were happening during last week. So what I mean by that is essentially not can you learn from experience. I think that's pretty clear. But how do you value lessons learned through experience? And when I say how do you value, I literally mean like, do you put much stock in your past experiences? And do you think that, I guess maybe relying on past experience is somehow either, we could say, more valuable or less valuable than other ways of, I suppose, learning things or seeking to comprehend things. So maybe you don't really need experience to learn anything. Maybe we're able to just sort of comprehend or understand strategically, conceptually, very important, valuable lessons that are of the utmost importance. And the kind of lessons maybe we could learn through life experience aren't as significant, or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe they're more significant. Maybe it's the lessons we learn through trial and error or just enduring life itself, and experiences happen naturally, organically. Maybe those are the most valuable kinds of lessons. And when I say lessons, I mean things that will impact you moving forward. Again, when we talk about learning from experience, we mean something like a tangible, I guess, change of sorts that happens in how you see things or your sort of the way you're acting in terms of where you're going, your motivation, your self-awareness, your awareness of others, your awareness of whatever industry you're in, something along these lines. Hang on, we got a request for somebody to join. But yeah, so that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. Again, we got a small crew here. Nothing but the best and brightest. Couldn't make it, so here we are. And yeah, we're going to talk for a few minutes and see what we think. Do you have any initial thoughts on this? I mean,
so like, what would be the alternative to learning from experience? If I'm hearing you right, something real abstract, like you can maybe figure out math, or maybe reading from a textbook.
Well, yeah. Let me sort of expound upon that. So to get more specific with the context of this question, we were talking about automatons and AI. You guys remember it went down that road last time? And so the question was, well, what makes a human human?
Oh, okay.
Define humanity. And then somebody said, I think it was this guy, I think somebody said, well, maybe what makes a human uniquely human is the life experience part. And so the way that human beings learn, specifically through experience itself, is innately human and can't really be replicated or duplicated technologically. So that's kind of why we were talking about it. We were like, well, maybe that's the most human thing about humans. And so the question now is like, well, what exactly is that? So how valuable is it to learn from experience, as opposed to, say, if you were an automaton or you were an AI, or you could learn things almost instantly. You could download the understanding into your brain. Would that be preferable? Is that what human beings are trying to get to with this sort of like, let's be completely rational at all times, Spock mentality, right? Or is it more along the lines of, no, I mean, the way that human beings learn through time, through experience, and everything that comes with it, I guess it's the most valuable. That maybe the experience itself is, I guess in some way, even though it slows us down in the learning process, is it still somehow more valuable because of the way you learn through it? So does that kind of make more sense?
Okay. Huh. I mean, it would feel more individual, I suppose. It's your experience, right?
Yeah.
The computer presumably scans a bunch of people's testimonies about their life experience or whatever, does some aggregizing and thinks through the whole thing and spits out the optimal solution. But that's kind of a meta-analysis of everybody's experience. The actual humans in this case they just have one slice of the pie. Is there is a part of me that sees the computer and like, yeah, that sounds good. Let's smash it all together, right? Everybody knows we've got a piece of the pie, and everybody knows there's value in learning from other perspectives, right? So let's turn that up to 11, shove everybody's experience into the hypothetical computer, and see what pops out. That could be interesting.
The high,
I'd look at that printout. I'd read that.
yeah, I would too. Yeah, I don't think I disagree. I mean, there's an appeal to that. It's hard. Anybody who's taken a class knows it's hard to learn, like just academically. Now imagine just life itself and how hard it is to learn life lessons. Wouldn't it be more convenient if we could just download somebody else's life experience, life lesson, take the lesson itself from it, take the moral from it, and then not have to actually endure the pain that comes with it? I mean, what we're describing is something like a vicarious experience. But even when describing that, we're still saying, well, the value is from experience. Maybe I just don't have to be the one that experiences it.
I mean, I personally, if I'm reading something or listening to somebody else, I try as often as I can to learn from somebody else's experience. You
Sure.
call that learning. You learn the easy way or you learn the hard way. And that's what you're getting at, right? You make a painful mistake for yourself, that's the hard way. You learn from somebody else's experience and you take their advice or whatever, and you learn from their painful life experience, or you learn in the abstract first and then don't make the mistake in the first place. That's the
Yeah.
easy way.
And the more often you can do that throughout the course of your life, you could say that the more intelligent you are. Yeah, that's interesting. So getting back to the human element, I don't know how to accept this request. I think I already did. I hope I did. But then again, it's just the three of us still. At any rate, yeah, getting back to the human element, I do wonder if, I don't know. Okay, think about it like from this perspective. Think about teaching somebody something. Think about trying to impart your life experience to somebody. Um, what is involved in that? What is that sort of phenomenon? It is you trying to distill your own individual slice of experience down in terms that your other party might not just comprehend, but impact. And I think that's kind of what I'm trying to drive at here is that when you learn things, quote unquote, the hard way, or just if you have to put forth effort, if you exert something of yourself in order to achieve an insight, that right there is impactful because of the process. I mean, if you're just constantly downloading information and you're not really getting any visceral associations with the information, yeah, sure, you're gathering data and you're learning stuff, but is it impactful? Or is the goal to get outside of that? Is the goal to sort of be like, well, no, you shouldn't be swayed by any sort of visceral experiences. It should just be completely rational. If you could remove the elements that sway us or distract us, that's progress, all the better. And is it less human? Oh, I'm sorry, Luke. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, right from the beginning of this talk, a picture kind of emerged, which is always these different portals from experience to the information of the experience. So, literature is trying to portray this experience and then get you to some insight, some negative information. Science is trying to go from some experience and then to get you to some information. And then George, you bring up math, of course. We look at these things and then measure them and then come up with math and we get to some nugget of truth. I think what normally happens, and which is why I really like this topic, is people tend to forget the experience that goes into and is necessary to get the insight, such that people feel as if, Google is for me the best example of this. You can go in and you can type any question It doesn't matter if you've had the experience at all. And it's going to pop up with some sort of answer, some sort of information of which you have zero experience. You go in and check, what a doctor would say about how you're feeling. And you're like, oh, I have this. And the problem, though, is if you don't have the experience which leads up to the insight, it's almost as if uh, you have an answer for which you don't know how to engage with. The only way to engage with it is almost pure submission, 100% slavery to it. There is no way without having the experience to just take somebody 100% on whatever they're telling you, because you don't have any way to engage with it. And so I guess the way that I started thinking about it is there is a bridge between these two things. And I don't know exactly how to put that bridge together. And we redo it over it multiple times in our life. So when we're young, we have a certain view of ourselves and all of the information. Then we start learning about our psychology later, and then our family dynamics. And as each year goes on, we reevaluate so the experience itself changes too when we get more information. And we look back and we're like, okay, I had this experience, but that didn't really tell me the information that was behind. I thought my family was like this, but they're not. They're like this. And so on the one hand, yes, you have to have the experience to get the information and to really have control of it. On the other hand, even if we have the experience, it's not clear that we make that bridge over to that nugget of information on the other side. So great topic, by the way. I really like, just think about it. Perfect philosophical topic.
Yeah, I think so. I like it too. I love everything you said. Maybe, and we've had conversations on topics closely related to this, Luke, but maybe the bridge is narrative.
Yeah.
So it's the narrative structure provided to us organically through time itself. That is, I guess, even if we don't have direct experience, we have experience with stories. We can tell a story, we can hear a story, we can learn from stories, we watch stories on television, we read stories. So somebody could tell us their story, and if they're really good at telling stories, sharing narratives, they're good at communicating, you can feel like you have something like the experience. And so maybe that's the key to transferring that nugget, as you said. I mean, this is what teachers do. We're talking kind of pedagogical acumen here. So yeah, the ability to not just like convey information in a way that's rational, but convey it in a way that's rhetorically satisfying, so that you're feeling the emotions as you're learning about the discovery of any sort of truth or what have you, or just the discovery of, who your parents really are as people, so whatever the case may be. The point being is that it does seem as though, going back to last week's topic, that human element maybe is specifically narrative.
I like that thought.
Yeah.
I like that thought. Narrative, definitely, I agree, super important. Like if we're going to talk about a life lesson, right, we're talking about the moral of the story, right? We're going to take our individual life experience and we're going to thread it into a narrative, and we're going to come out with some kind of conclusion or moral. And that's what we're talking about when we say life lesson, something I learned. You have to make a story out of it first before you can.
The only dangerous thing about that is if you become very adept at conveying, we'll just say, lessons through stories, suddenly, especially with people who have no experience with what it is on which you're speaking, you can just create the truth. You can create an experience that isn't actually faithful to the phenomenon itself, and convince people that that's what the thing is, that's what the experience is. So, I mean, let's say, for example, especially to suit one's preferences, this is where things get dangerous. So let's say, for example, I don't know, I'm tired of eating pizza. I've had pizza 9 meals in a row. This would never happen, of course. I would have pizza 9 meals in a row, but I'd never get tired of it. But let's say, for the sake of the example, I get tired of it. And then, I don't know, my buddy comes over from, I don't know, a different part of the country, and he's like, I've never had, New York style pizza. Let's go get pizza. And then I tell him, oh, you don't want that. Let me tell you how gross it is. It's so greasy. Nobody likes it. It's all made, and I could create what the experience of eating a pizza is to him in such a way where he's gonna not like it. And that kid will never try pizza, but he'll think he has some sort of sense of pizza because of the narrative. Now I want pizza.
Yeah, what do we do then? Because it creates a pretty instant problem, and that is, yes, narrative does seem to be one of the main pathways we have to get to the experience, and then we can make false narratives, and it seems almost exclusively we're making false narratives. But at the same time, the false narrative doesn't necessarily get at a completely false truth at the end. The truth is still there. You didn't want pizza, right? The truth is still like in the story. He just can't find it.
Good point. Yeah.
Uh, so I for me the narrative's still functioning. There's still truth in the narrative. It's knowing how to interpret the narratives, and that's not an easy task.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
we can't literally experience everything, right? We absolutely have to rely
Good.
on other people telling us things to draw more than just very myopic, like this is literally just me and my life. We know we only have a piece of the pie, right? If we want more pie than just our little piece, we have to trust. So going back to what Luke was saying about Google, right? I think there's something in between, 100% trust and 100% rejection. What you do is you take other information or you take other people's stories and you check it against your own. You check it against your own experience, you check it against your own worldview, and then you sort of make this bizarrely it's an act of the will, right? You decide, you check it, and you decide in some subconscious part of your brain, maybe in some cases, if you're going to accept it or if you're going to reject it, right? And it's not like a completely rational, like, truth scanner. It's I don't know, kind of a feeling, kind of an emotional reaction, and then you get the reason afterward, which is bizarre and seems backwards, but I think that's how we work deep down.
That's interesting. It's an interesting point. You might be right about that.
Which would make sense on why narratives are so important, is because they work both on both levels, especially the emotional level. Especially the emotional level.
Exactly. I mean, you could say the more narrative something is, the more emotionally evocative it is. And then we get into questions of, can you ever escape narrative? So we're using our experience that we process narratively to evaluate other narratives that are being conveyed to us within the broader scheme of the narrative of your life in general. I mean, I had a term I used back when I was in Yale for 2 weeks. It was called intertextual, which is all of life is essentially narratives interweaving with other narratives. And so when you try to talk about something like this objective truth, like truth is an object, you sort of lose the sense of what truth really is, in my estimation. And truth is, again, it's interwoven into the narrative fabric. You can't extricate the two. And if narrative is about not just understanding, but also conveying, well, then that's when things get a little tricky. Um, Going back to your point there, George, it's like, well, how do I know which narratives to trust, even my own? And as soon as you learn something, maybe that's pertinent to your life, about, I don't know, your past or something like that, it suddenly changes how you understand yourself. And then you ask yourself, well, should I believe this narrative? Or should I try to find, I guess, hard evidence as an anchor point? But then that takes us back around to the beginning again, which is, well, okay, so let's say you have something like evidence. You still have to grasp it through the medium of experience that, again, you create by being human, by being a walking, talking narrative yourself, a life story. Guys, I can only for so long. I mean,
Isra in the chat put an exclamation mark, so she wants to talk. So I'm going to put something in the chat after her real quick so I don't forget.
thank you for looking at the queue.
Uh,
Yeah, Isra, go right ahead.
Okay, hey guys. The topic I feel like is super interesting, and I think it really depends when it comes to especially giving lessons through stories. I feel like that's effective. But at the same time, I feel like it, like Professor Manzi pointed out, it could be dangerous because it could be each person's own experience dictating their own narrative that, oh, this was good and this was bad. So in those cases, I feel like, especially when you look at it from a child's perspective where they don't have enough of their own experiences to kind of assess that is it right or wrong, they kind of believe anything you tell them through the stories. And I think if done right, it can make the individual very smart. But if it's done carelessly and just things are thrown at them that, oh, this is bad, this is good, so those kind of things in terms of stories just becomes the inherent belief of the child, which I feel like is much harder to knock down once the child actually becomes independent and start thinking for themselves.
All right, yeah, really interesting. So, yeah, that last part especially, when the child begins to think for itself. Well, I guess let me ask you this real quick as a follow-up. When we begin to think for ourselves, when we begin to question the narratives that we've inherited, is another way to put it. I think inherently we seek to replace them with other narratives. It's not like we're simply trying to get rid of a story. We're trying to figure out the quote-unquote true story, the real story. What's the real story here? Stuff like that. And I bring that up because as one begins to realize, oh, I'm not just hearing how it is, I can decide how it is. I can tell my story.
Mm-hmm.
I can give my experience. Well, then it becomes, use a fancy word here, an epistemological issue in terms of, I guess, never getting outside of the narrative. Because even if you make some new discovery or you glean some insight as you're growing up, as you're coming into your own, as you're thinking critically for yourself, you're still doing it in terms of a narrative. You're telling a different story. You're not getting rid of it. So I do think that when it comes to something like, going back to last week's point, an automaton or artificial intelligence, it seems like the human thing can be traced back to narrative precisely because I'm not so sure automatons can tell stories because stories are based on experience.
Right. And then I feel like it's all down to interpretation because everybody takes away different things from the stories. Because when a movie that comes to my mind that's the story is The Knight's Tale. I'm sure everybody might have seen this. It's about a young Thatcher boy who actually wants to become a knight, but he's not born into knighthood. Eventually, he struggles so much, and he convinces himself that no, it's in my hands to change my stars. He ends up becoming the knight because of his honor and because he believes that he is a knight. So he started acting like that. He behaved like that. His judgment was like that, and so on, which convinced the prince eventually that, oh, okay, let the guy be the knight, or he just kind of finds a loophole and just like convinces everybody else that, yeah, he is a knight. Don't punish him. So in that case, I think it depends on how our experiences dictate how we digest that information.
Yeah, I like that. And again, the digestion process comes from the spoon feeding. So we might digest the narrative easier if the narrative is told well or told convincingly and other people already believe it. But yeah, I mean, that reminds me of an old-fashioned expression, you think who you are. But it has a negative connotation, but I think it's apropos in this respect because if you can tell, I don't want to say fake it till you make it, another kind of expression that might be warranted here, but if you tell yourself, no, I am brave, or whatever the case may be, and then you can convince yourself of it, and then you become it. I mean, is that like a lie that turns true? And then you're able to convince yourself that you are brave by telling yourself stories, or by watching stories of other brave people, and you're like, I could do that. So
So
it
I
does seem
think,
like you can manufacture some truth here.
yeah, the storytelling part of it, if we internally we tell ourselves stories as well. We tell ourselves tons of stories, which kind of dictate how we are perceived by the world. For example, if somebody has a victim mentality, or somebody thinks that, oh, all the wrong things in the world happen to me, I'm the most unfortunate person in the world, nothing bad ever happens to anybody else, it's just me who's the victim. They start seeing those things in everyday life. They only see those parts that are unfair to them. They don't see all the blessings that they've been given. They don't see the kindness that people show them, because they have this mindset, and they keep telling themselves the story that, oh, I'm the victim here. In any situation, there's nothing worse that can happen to anyone but me. And vice versa. On the other hand, if there's a hero mentality, where the other extreme would be that, oh, nothing bad ever happens to me, nothing, like, I have such a good luck that even if I threw a stone, I can find $100 bill on the stone, on the pavement or whatever. So in that case, both of these are just internal stories and internal narratives, how we basically see the world, and how we kind of interpret the information that's coming our way.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic point. I mean, this is hermeneutics. Yeah, so it's an interpretive framework, and so that's what's so funny. To your point, is that when you can switch your interpretive framework, when you start telling yourself different stories, not that you're a victim, but that you're whatever, an achiever or something. Um, you can look back at those same experiences, getting back to the topic of experience, and interpret them differently. Even though you were there, you remember how it felt, you have visceral memories of it, but now you interpret it differently. But what does that mean, to interpret it differently? It means to tell a different story about the events that you witnessed. It's like, oh, that wasn't me being, that wasn't me being bullied. That was I don't know, my older brother's toughening me up, something like that. Uh, yeah, and so, and what's so funny about, maybe this is what's really human. Humans have the ability to do this whenever they want. Or is that too dangerous, George? Or are we getting too far adrift to where now anything that we come up with, we could say is legit? Where's
Well,
the end?
no, because I think, and I agree with all of this, by the way.
What happened?
Muted myself real quick there. I hit the enter button to put this in chat,
Oh.
but I thought I wanted to mute. There's a push and a pull, right? I think between reality and like the hard data, because like our narrative experiences depend on something, right? There's raw material experiences, data feeding into our narratives, and we're aware, no matter what story I tell myself, right? There's a real world out there, and even if we can only access it through narrative, it's still there. It's like behind a curtain or whatever, but it's still feeding us information. So there's a push and a pull, right? Our narratives can shape the way we engage it, but there are limits. We can't just fabricate any old thing. I mean, we can, if we tell ourselves, things are bad, things are bad, things are bad, we can sure make ourselves depressed. So there's some power there. Like I said, push and pull. So I say here in the chat, there's a creative dialogue that happens between this objective evidence that gets provided to us from the real world and the human subject, who is continually taking that data, synthesizing it into a narrative, and then resynthesizing it as more experience come in. There's push and pull between both. They feed into each other. The objective world is there providing experience. The human narrativizes it and gets to view the truth, even if it's distorted, even if they get it wrong sometimes in the details. We can actually gain a little bit of truth, I think. And all of us are here somewhere between what you might call an honest human being who's really trying to find out what the real world is like, however imperfectly, versus one that for one reason or another, is deliberately distorting things, whether that's a subconscious like defense mechanism that they learn through trauma in childhood or whatever, or like really dishonest where they are trying to fool someone else and they're deliberately constructing a false reality. But even those folks have to deal with the raw data, right, and are limited into what kind of fairy tales they can construct.
Yeah, marvelous points. I like all of them.
I feel like something to add here would be that eventually, like if you're in both cases, if you're trying to find the truth or trying to run away from it, at some point, I believe it starts dictating our level of happiness in a way, in the sense that the person who keeps lying to themselves and lying to the world, trying to portray a persona that's not there, eventually they're constantly unhappy because they feel like they have to work even harder to achieve something that they feel like it's unattainable. And vice versa, on the other hand, somebody who feels like they're living the truth, once they come across a piece of information that conflicts what they think is true, but is actually the real truth, they start questioning everything around them, and they start feeling insecure about it. And again, they go on that journey of just trying to find what's real to them or what they think might be the truth in their opinion.
Yeah, and because I do think for the most part, people aren't necessarily nefarious and trying to invent truths. I just think they're trying to figure it out, and maybe they're just, they're working with what they got, according to their experience and what they've gathered, and maybe they're just mistaken. Maybe their interpretations just aren't grounded, but they're not trying to obfuscate the truth. They think that they have it on some level. All right, let me say this. My tablet's going to die any second, and this is the only device I have that we can record on. So I'm just going to end the recording now. If you all like this, here's a little sample of the Dallas College Philosophy Club. Doesn't mean we're going to stop the conversation, but I got to stop recording. And if I, when the tablet dies in 10 seconds, I'll come back on my phone. All right.
Okay. So
think about it.
So, George, I really like what you wrote. Israel, I'm really enjoying the conversation and what you're saying. And I wanted to focus on this because, but everybody's brought it up. This idea of, but the real world is part of this push and pull. But these people are, we're trying to get to the truth, and it seems to me that what we're having a push and pull with isn't the real world. It is our cultural ideals. So, when you go and knock on the wall behind you, unless you're living in the 21st century, that makes no sense. So, it's the narrative that we're having, discussion that we're having, doesn't necessarily isn't like we're touching the real world, but our culture's conception of what the real world is up to this point. So there's still a barrier. It's us between the big conversation and then our individual conversation, which seems to be the back and forth pull. I don't know if you agree or disagree with that, but I figure I'd throw that out because any other way of saying it for me at least, can't make sense of history. We have to make sense of the fact of the thing that we've been pushing and pulling against is radically changed through time.
Maybe it would help if you provided an example or two of what exactly you've got in mind. You mean to tell me that other people in other cultures aren't, I don't know, like, just because we can't help but see the world through our glasses doesn't mean the light isn't really out there bouncing off of something and coming in through my lenses, right?
Well, ancient Greeks thought light was actually exiting through your eyes, and it was like a flashlight going towards the object. So there's just so many. It doesn't necessarily. Well, it does change the experience. So everybody in the ancient Near East and everybody up to about 1500, when they looked up, they saw a dome up there which looked like hammered out metal, and on and so there was a different. The entire experience of the world is different. Their map of the world is just the amount of the world that they've seen until, we have just the discovery of all these other continents. So for me, what the real world is now changed so vastly that what we mean by real world, we can't even experience it. So you don't go and experience subatomic uh, protons, neutrons, and electrons, but you received it narrative from your culture and you never experienced and never could experience it. But it's still part of this idea of maybe what might be real behind our experience. So that's what I guess is in my head, is thinking in those terms.
Hmm.
Well, I think that's why people try to travel so much, in terms that they want to experience something new, in terms of something new from their culture and something new from their beliefs and how people might live on the other side of the world, or even in a new neighborhood or a new a restaurant that people try to go to and so on, trying new cuisines and so on. So I think it might be in pursuit of that truth, trying to identify that, okay, what else is out there, what do I think is real, and what would be the common consensus of what's considered as real.
Yeah, trying the multicultural approach of getting as much information. I think that's the only way that you can grow it, and I would agree with that, is to get as many, and not just here and now, but historical perspectives. It creates more lenses that you have for what constitutes real. That seems right.
So, Luke, are you saying that the real world, like how I've used it in that post, like objective reality or
Yeah.
whatever, doesn't exist because we can't get to it because we're limited by our cultural experiences?
Yeah, by necessity. Not that it doesn't exist, but it can't be experienced. So that can't be the thing that we're fighting against. What we're fighting against is our narrative and stories which we've made about the real world, and then my experience itself of the world. So it seems to me those two things are fighting. And what's on the other side of it? Yeah, there's a real world, but I have no contact with that at all.
Well, I
Until
think the realness,
yeah.
the realness of it might be two sides of the same coin. I mean, both situation could be real. It's just kind of like walking to the dark side of the moon. It exists, but we're gonna have trouble getting there, kind of a deal. And I think something that keeps popping into my mind with this
Yeah.
narrative of the real world and so on is, basically there might be two people. One of them has experienced everything worse and bad about humanity, where they've been cheated, they've been lied to, they've been harassed, and all the negatives. And on the other side, there's this really pampered person who's never experienced anything bad. He's always experienced everything, all the good sides of the people, in terms of people being kind to them, talking softly to them, caring about their feelings, and so on and so forth. So to those both of these people, both things are realities, but they've never experienced the other part, so they can't even imagine what it's like to be on the other side of the fence. They don't know what it would be like to be treated the unnatural way in their circumstance, in terms of not being able to experience the good or the bad. So I feel like both narratives would be true to each person, but it would just be, like I said, two sides of the same coin. Both are equally real. It's just we've not experienced them at the same time.
Yeah, I like that point, because it gets at this notion of a kind of a well-rounded, multifaceted truth to everything. So let's say you and I know the same person. You have a relationship with this person, and you think the person is, mean person, uh, cruel, um, not funny. I don't know, jerk. And I have a relationship with that person. I think the person's really sweet and kind. It's like, are you right and I'm wrong? No, that's not even the right question. We're both right, to your point. We both have, based upon our experiences with the object, with the phenomenon, with the person, we're able to drive our sense of who that person is. And the more we're exposed to that person, the more sides of the person we'll see. And then before we know it, you and I will be in agreement. Yeah, this person's nice and mean. So I think it's something along these lines. where we can kind of, I guess, take our narratives and weave them together to have like a more robust, a richer account of the experience.
But Luke would say, you don't know the person at all. You're just knowing your construction of that person. You're taking one made up construction and another made up construction, and you're synthesizing them together into this third made up construction. See, I would say, what is making this construction and this construction and what is giving those things the shape that they are? It's the person, right? There's some real
Yes,
data there. There's a real person to be known in this analogy,
I agree.
that's providing the information of these synthesis. And even if this one's 80% right and this one's 60% right and the synthesis is like 90% right because it takes the best of both, you're better off, right? Even if you can't get that last 10%, you shouldn't throw out the 90, right?
Right. No, that's right. You are dealing with a real person.
Well, I mean, my point there is that, yeah, so my narrative construction of the person is based upon empirical observation. So you know, maybe Isra saw the person kick a puppy. That happened. So now Isra is basing her narrative on actual events as they unfolded. And I'm doing so that's so there is a reality. I think you're right, George. There's a reality to, you know, our narratives don't come out of nowhere. They're always derived from experience.
So is this where the narrative comes? The first impressions are the last impressions, where people, at least in my culture, people are very concerned about how they're perceived the first time, and all the efforts, like when we're going to meet somebody first time in their homes, we're all on our best behaviors. We try to perceive that, oh, this is who we really are. So would it be true that first impressions are last impressions?
Yeah, I'm curious to what y'all think. I mean, I would say no. I would say the first impressions are skin deep, and the more experience you have with people, the greater you become aware of their depth and their variance, you might just say. And so I would say that when I think back on people I've known for a long time, and I think back on my first impression of them, it's very different from who I understand them to be today. Not that I was wrong with that first impression, but I just was like, oh yeah, that was them in that context. And now I know this person in all these different contexts. And you know, we adapt. So we change based on the context. So it's like, yeah, this is who he is in this position when his back's against the wall. Like I know my friend Dave when he's scared. You know, I know how he's gonna behave because of all the experiences. My first impression of him was that this guy doesn't get scared of anything. But now I realize, oh no, this guy gets scared, and here's what he does when he's scared. You know, he makes cutting jokes, insults my haircut. So that's kind of like, I would say no, it's the opposite. That first impressions, not that they diminish, but they themselves get put in their proper context.
Yeah, I tend to agree.
Now, okay, so if we consider our idea of what a person is to be like this piece of wet clay, and then each time we put some impression in it, and then we want to say, well, do we ever get to the real person? And so I wanted to answer George's question of the problem that I was having is, well, the wet clay is a narrative also. The idea of what we have as a person is also part of our narrative construction, because we're like, no, it's just individual me. It's like, really? I mean, it seems you came connected by an umbilical cord. You have an entire history. You have an entire family. Where do we draw the lines with this idea of a person? So it's not just my experience going out, which is part of our narrative structure, but what we normally think of as the object of our experience is also part of the narrative structure.
You can't escape. There's no escaping.
Cannot escape. Yes.
See, I guess that very last point there is where I would tend to disagree. I think there really is something out there, and even if I can
I
only
agree.
look at it, you just think we can't get to it.
How could we? Yeah.
I don't think we could get to it in its totality, but I think we can catch a glimpse of it.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, that as long as we're not saying like, okay, we know exactly what a person is, and the only things about our interpretation and It's our interpretation that can be wrong. As long as we're keeping both sides, both our experience and the thing experienced, as part of the thing that, yeah, we can't ever get to the totality of, then I agree with you. That's the only thing I was holding back. Like, there's this 100% real world that has this totality we could ever get to. I don't see that.
Well, can I wax religious now?
Sure.
So if God exists, right, and he made a thing, he made a reality, surely whatever his perception of reality is and reality are the same thing. Like, God can see the totality of it, right?
Okay. No, I don't think so.
So you
How,
think
how how can God know what my experience is before I have my experience?
well, he's
So it seems that there's something new that has to happen, especially with the Christian conception of God, where you have a development. Did an incarnation happen? Isn't that a vast change in the idea of God? It seems as if there is not just a change, but a change which is almost unfathomable that happened through the Godhead, becoming a human. Does God know what it is to become human before God becomes human? For me at least, it doesn't seem so. How could God know that? It's an emptying of himself, like the kenosis idea of the Godhead emptying himself into Christ. That seems to be something new to me, and that seems to be kind of the beautiful narrative part of Christianity, is this newness in the Godhead that it doesn't seem any other religion has.
I'd have to think about that angle some more. I think I lost the conversation somewhere in there. So because God experiences new things, his perception of even God can't perceive true objective reality in its totality, because God
Right.
learns and grows and has human experiences in Christ.
Has to be, yeah. That's at least my view of it.
Now that's some real deep stuff. I'm not going to claim that I've got an answer on that one. But this whole like interplay between reality and perception is something I've thought about before, and I don't know. This is kind of a half-baked, I guess, idea I've had about it before. It's like, okay, well, we've got this curtain, and okay, if we take my what I've been talking about the whole, let's say there really is a reality on the other end, and we limited human beings we can catch a glimpse of it maybe, and Lucas is saying, okay, we can't get to it. We can only it itself becomes part of the narrative. Let's say that's not how it is, just for the sake of argument here. And then let's say on the other side of the curtain here is not a thing. It's not objective reality, this like depersonalized, like, I don't know, lump of whatever. What if it's a person? Okay, and God, right? What if God is on the other side and God wants to tell us what is on the other side of the curtain? And sticking with my Christian perspective here, because this is the category I've been thinking in, right? God comes from the other side of the curtain as Christ and reveals himself to us, right? And then the nature of the truth that's revealed there is not propositional, right? Like you would get if it was a bunch of things on the other side of the curtain, but relational because it's a person. That is kind of how my Christian faith and interplays with these sorts of questions here, is that it's not just that we're trying to peek on the other side of the curtain and doing the best we can, but literally the one who is on the other side of the curtain has come and showed himself to us.
Yeah. Yeah, that seems right, but in what form? In the form of narrative, right?
Yeah.
Which is the amazing thing is we're still in. So in other words, even if God comes on the other side of the curtain, can we know about the other side of the curtain? No. Which is why God had to take the form of the narrative and the visual and the human, because that's all we can know.
Yeah, great discussion, y'all. Yeah, very, very deep waters today, which is fantastic. Yeah, I like George. I like how you're seeing this and putting it in that Christian context.
Yeah, I do
Yeah,
too. Fun.
illuminating points. I mean, you're making me think of stuff that I never considered. And I do want to go back too to the point Luke made about Christ becoming man, and whether or not God grows and learns. Um, yeah, I do think that the Christ is the part of it where we see the growing and learning. I mean, it's so crucial that Christ actually suffers on the cross, and he couldn't have understood how painful it was. So he's learning about how painful it is. I think that's a key element in that story. So, having said that, the fact that he takes the form of man, you can argue perhaps, or we can consider that that's another way of saying God's wisdom takes the form of a narrative. Because human beings exist in time because we die. So, in order for us to be able to grasp God's wisdom, again, sticking to the Christian context, he had to distill it to us in human terms, literally.
Yeah.
Mm.
We had to get a story of a man who lived and died.
Yeah, I think Wittgenstein said something like, "If a lion could talk, we couldn't understand it," or something like that. Yeah, so yeah, there's this idea of even interspecies, it's hard to be able to communicate. So yeah, you'd have to become a man. That would be the only way, or we'd have to become a lion to talk to a lion, or something like that.
So can we all agree? I really appreciate everything, and Luke especially. I appreciate you sharing your perspective and trying to us having this, how we say, back and forth.
Yeah.
Perhaps you've indeed persuaded me. Can we agree? Okay. Leaving aside the question of God, can God see objective reality as it really is? That one's too big for me. I'll confess that. Like I ain't got it.
Me either.
We we human beings can see part of it with great difficulty. We just can't see the whole thing at once. And it's really real and it's really there. It's just we can't get our hands around it. We can't get our minds around it. Are we both saying that? It's all everything we see obviously is mediated to us through narrative. But there really is something out there. We just can't really get to it. We can maybe get a glimpse of it. Can we agree maybe all on those words that I've used?
I think there's a reason why religions use the term hope and faith, and there's the idea of a future, is because there's always that grasping that you're talking about, and the grasping is always towards a future because we don't have it now, and we're waiting upon it. So yes, there's this idea of we're immersed in our lives and immersed in our narratives, but at the same time there's this grasping to try to get out, this grasping towards this future, this hope. So yeah, I would say it how I'm saying it now, but I'm agreeing with what you're saying, George.
Yeah, I'll co-sign that as well. Let's take this vantage point. We'll continue down the Christian zone, I suppose. So for a long time, when I taught Christian philosophy, I would teach it in such a way where the story, the narrative, the grand narrative of Christianity does have an end, and the end is, the second coming of Christ. So it's heaven on earth. That's the end of God's history. So the narrative closes. But the more we're talking, I'm not so sure that's the case, because how do we understand human beings to be in heaven? Are they still like humans? Are they still narratives? Are they having experiences? Are they existing in time? Are they having new experiences with other angels, or whatever the case may be? I think there's no other way to think of humans. So as long as you have a human being, the story continues. There's always
you could say it's the end of one story and the beginning of another one. I'd say that. The end of story. What does that even look like? We're just frozen.
Right.
Exactly.
I agree. I mean, I think there's more narrative. There's more dare I even use the word growth? We're going to be doing stuff. I mean, work was given to us. Here's, the theological training that I've received. You break history down into creation and then fall and then redemption. You can look at what it was before the fall, right? To sort of make inferences about what it's going to be when everything's restored. So there was work before the fall, there was human beings and bodies before the fall, relationships and so forth. It's just going to be like that. It's going to be like that. We're still going to be humans. There's still going to be stuff. There's still going to be stuff to do.
Yeah, I think that would be the key, is that the experience doesn't cease. And yeah, I mean, it's tough because you want to think of heaven as humans are perfect, but I think humans are perfectly human, which means they're still human. Yeah, and so when I would teach it earlier, it was like, no, this is the story of God's will from beginning to end, and God's last will and testament is heaven on earth, is the second coming. But yeah, I mean, if you want to, really hone in on the human experience of it, try to, it might be like, yeah, it's got to be, it's still human, it's still narrative. The story continues.
Well, yeah. If there's any, if God's interesting at all, then it has to be. It has to be inexhaustible, right? It has to keep going. There can't be an end where you see the full thing. It's like, oh, okay, I got it. It's just like, no, yeah, it has to keep going. There has to be continual narrative. There has to be continual understanding forever, or else God's not interesting at all. He's like a big machine that eventually you learn how the machine works, and you're like, oh, okay. But
Mm-hmm.
then, if I can understand God, it doesn't make God interesting.
Well, that gets back to what you were saying earlier, how reality, in order for God to go from one side of the curtain where he's on to the other, he had to become a human. He had to limit himself, right? So maybe heaven is just us growing and growing and growing in our appreciation of this vast, great, great goodness that is God, right? And just continually growing because there's always more
Yeah.
to learn and know and be.
And what about the goats?
The what?
We don't have to kill them anymore.
What about the goats? Sheep go to heaven, goats go to hell. What about the humans that exist in hell? If you want to continue down this road, what's their experience? Are they growing?
That is a great question. And hell is one of those things that I believe in spite of every desire in me that wishes it didn't exist and wasn't a real thing. What do you do with wickedness? What do you do with wickedness that is not atoned for? I mean, there are some people who think it's annihilation, right? You just get obliterated, and hell is you don't get to participate in this super awesome, like, remade heaven and earth.
Yeah.
I sure hope it's that. That seems like sounds better than eternal conscious torment, but
Yeah, I mean, well, and I only raised the question because again, they're humans too.
right.
What is their experience?
Yeah, this for me makes sense of. I think there's a way of reading hell which makes God actually come out looking better than worse. If you view kind of this sacrifice is for all people, and everybody has the status of redemption and salvation because of this Christ event, then the people that are in hell are there not because God put them there, but because they don't want to take part. And God's not a rapist.
Yeah, hell's doors are locked from the inside.
Not
It's
locked at all. They're always open. See, that that
mm,
that that has to be the only view of hell that makes sense. Is they're always open. They just don't want to go to heaven. And you can't make somebody do something that they don't want to do.
mm.
That's Dante's Inferno.
Dante's Inferno. Yes, that's Dante's
That's a
Inferno.
very interesting take. And you know what? Even if hell were exactly like things are now, I think compared to how good things are going to be, this is sure going to seem like hell. But I don't know if
Well,
that
I think
interpretation does justice to the fiery lake of burning sulfur imagery we get, which is not supposed to be literal necessarily, but
Right.
it's also not supposed to. It's not good, right? What it's a metaphor for is very, very bad and horrible, and um, this is one of those things that I'm just like, you know what? I trust that God has got it figured out better than I do on this one.
Well, I think it's kind of like a precursor. You know how the start of the semester, all the students are told that okay, everybody starts off with the 0 points. Nobody has anything on their record. It's up to your behavior throughout the semester that dictates where you land. Do you land an A or do you fail, and so on. And as a professor, you tell us that this is what I'm expecting of you. If you don't fulfill my expectation, this is what you can expect out of me in the end. So I think that's how heaven and hell is. We've been warned beforehand that okay, this, and this equals good. This, and this equals bad. And if we still persist and we're still trying to, justify our behaviors and so on, trying to say that oh no, I'll find a loophole, or maybe it's not like this, it's like that. In that case, I feel like then it's the result of hell, and heaven is the result basically. At that point there's nothing else you can do to like change God's mind and say that oh, let me try this again, or let me do some extra credit work, and I'll get to do a redo.
I do like the analogy because it
You're going to get a 0, so through faith in Christ we get credited with an A, and then knowing that we're going to get an A, we study because it's the right thing to do. I don't know how I would put the Muslim perspective on that. Maybe Israel, you can chime in there.
Gets put back in and lives a different person's life, and then they're judged based upon the totality of lives that have been lived.
Wait. So I've heard of this before, this story. Did you write that? Is that what you're saying?
I wrote a story where that is the conclusion. Yeah, but that seems to me to be the only absolutely fair conclusion.
I think it's an interesting take. I've heard of this before on the internet. I felt like it was like years and years and years ago. When did you write this thing?
Yeah, probably like 10 years ago.
Maybe I heard of it.
That'd
Small
be
world.
weird. That'd be weird.
Yeah, that'd be touching real reality. All right, y'all. Well, we had an hour. Yeah, so fortunately the recording didn't stop and the tablet died. So we got we got the whole video, which is fantastic.
Nice.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, it did stop. Here's the thing. I got an email yesterday saying the Dallas College Philosophy Club Teams page is like at its max capacity for storage space. So we got to figure out. We have to go back and delete all the videos. They're all on YouTube, so it's all good. But all right,
we
thanks for
have
coming.
to prevent Mark from talking so much in future videos.
Mark came in, said hi, and then stopped the recording. Okay. Yeah, well, like I said, didn't know who. Hey, there he is. Oh,
There he is. I was wondering if I'd get him to show up with that jab.
There he is. So yeah, again, I did not expect the conversation to go in this direction, but it was really cool. I appreciated the trajectory. Yeah, we definitely went down kind of a religious pathway, I suppose, but
You're welcome.
yeah, but certainly well warranted given again the trajectory of the conversation. So having said that, I don't know if we're meeting next week. That's to be determined. Look for the email. And of course, you can always just check in on Tuesday. If you see the little camera next to the thing, that means we're there. But that is up in the air because of return week. So yeah, this may be the last meeting of the summer. It's been a great summer. I think we met every week. Pretty. Go us.
Well, definitely looking forward to meeting y'all in person. If that's not next week, obviously, which is TBD. But hopefully one of these days, God willing, we'll be able to all meet in person and shake hands and so forth. I really appreciated what y'all were saying today, everybody. So thank you for that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, y'all. All right, take care. Brush your hair.
All right, thank you guys. Absolutely, and brush your teeth.
Don't forget to think about it.
All right, bye y'all. Have a great
Bye.
day.
All right.